It's a dead heat now. Again, my reaction's not so much to the Times, and I'm dead serious here. It's to people that freak out disproportionately on the Times, and then the Times doing 15 stories on their poll. Fox will not do 15 stories on their Fox poll. Morning Consult won't, but it's become this cottage industry for people on the other side of the Chinese wall that Maura is not on. So she has nothing to do with this. Please do not direct any comments or tweets to her.
Not involved in polls.
I just for people at home, and it's important for them to kind of see what's behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I have, for 6 months, since people have been freaking out about Biden's team, I'm telling you, every time I go in and talk to anybody that's running the campaign, the big part of the campaign, I don't know what they're telling you and what they're telling other people. They act like people that are holding 4 aces. Well, what about this? Yeah, that's pretty bad. What about this? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Boy, that looks really tough. Yeah, boy, Trump. They really...
Is this a criticism or...?
No, I'm telling you, they know something that I think a lot of us don't know. And they look at numbers and they see where things are going. They've had a theory of a case that when people realize Donald Trump is going to be getting into the race, things are going to start gelling better for him. They understand that you win politics by raising money and organizing on the ground. They understand Donald Trump's numbers are way down in every way in fundraising. And they'll say, oh, well, we're going to... No, they're not. They're not going to... They're never going to catch Joe Biden. And as far as organization goes, we all know, anybody who's been involved in a political campaign, if you're tearing up like steaks in April and May, you're not going to put them back down in July and August. Donald Trump is going to be pounded on the ground. The blocking and the tackling, the Biden people feel great about. And they have about 1,000 clips of Donald Trump that every day they're like, which one are we going to use today? Boop. And it just makes them look horrible.
Yeah. The Biden campaign...
They're supremely confident.
Yes. I mean, they are cognizant that it will be very close. They are confident, but they know it's going to be tight. In fact, an aide told me in the last week or so that this person was saying, I feel very good about where we are. We're going to win decisively by less than a point, because that's how this is going to be. This race is going to be tight, but they like where they are, in part because of the fundamentals. They have far better organization. They have far more state offices. They have far more money on hand, and that advantage is probably only going to grow. They do feel like that once Americans start paying attention, and to Mara's point, most are not just yet.
Yeah.
Most still think there's some skepticism whether this is going to be the race. And I'm told yesterday that's part of why these debates are important and why they're happening so early, for 2 reasons. First of all, there just isn't an understanding now. So many more Americans vote early. The debate commission was going to have their debates late October. That's too late. Too many ballots have already been cast.
But your second point, I'm still having intelligent people with advanced degrees telling me, who's the Republican nominee really going to be?
Yeah. People still wonder. They think Joe Biden is too old. They think Donald Trump, well, he'll be in prison. He can't do it. Like, whatever it might be, there are people who are still skeptical. And that's why a Biden person was telling me last night, June is so important, because that June debate, what that's going to do, that's going to grab Donald Trump, who's been turned into white noise the last couple of years, and he's being put in Americans' living rooms.
Yeah.
Here's the guy. Here's the guy. He's the nominee. Do you really want this again? They think that'll change things.
I don't know if I'm suffering from campaign post-traumatic stress, but I just don't go all Robbie Mook on us. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
I'm not talking about, as James Carville would say, algorithms.
Okay, but
Robbie talks about algorithms. What are algorithms? No.
Anything could happen.
Here's the theory of the case. And their theory of the case, the Biden campaign, and I think they're dead right. It's going to be a close race. And in close races, it's the blocking, it's the tackling that wins it for you. We saw this in 2004. We thought that 2004 with Bush against Kerry was going to be just like 2000. But you had Ken Mehlman, who was blocking and tackling from January on. Just phone calls every day, going around. And now you have Jen O'Malley Dillon doing it every day. And that's amazing. And that stuff adds up in close races. If you know it's going to be a close race, that stuff adds up. So, again, maybe they're wrong. But I will tell you, the difference between this campaign in 16 is there was arrogance in the 16 campaign. They made fun of Donald Trump. They said no way Donald Trump could win. They went on Saturday Night Live and mocked and ridiculed Donald Trump as the Republican nominee. This is the one good thing about these New York Times polls. It scares the crap out of all the supporters who will say to fundraisers, please, may we give you more? And so I guess after the election's over, Trump will probably say it was a conspiracy. The New York Times Siena poll always overplayed how bad things were for Biden to juice his fundraising, because that's working too.
So let's get caught up. Let's get caught up on the news that broke on our show yesterday. President Biden and Donald Trump agreeing to presidential debates. Things escalated pretty rapidly throughout yesterday afternoon, with both candidates announcing they have accepted two invitations to debate, once on CNN on June 27th and again on ABC News on September 10th. The rules will differ from past election cycles. The candidates agreed to bypass the Commission on Presidential Debates, which had organized these face-offs every 4 years since 1988. Biden also requested these guidelines, which Trump begrudgingly accepted, or at least we think he accepted it. Never know. That there be no audience in the room, that no third-party candidates be allowed to participate, that only a select group of news outlets can host, and that a candidate's microphone be shut off if they go over their allotted speaking time.
All right, John Heilman, come on. I'm skeptical that Trump will ever put himself in that position where he's not saved by a roaring crowd.
You know,
have one outside, whatever.
I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that Donald Trump is not as good as his word, and that he won't necessarily make good on this. On his I'll meet him anywhere, anytime pledge. There is though, you know, the thing that Trump has been the kind of the core paradigm for the campaign from the Trump campaign's point of view is Donald Trump is strong, Joe Biden is weak. He's weak, failing, flailing, old, fumbling.
They don't want that contrast because Donald Trump is weak and flailing and miserable.
But that's not what they think. That's not what they think.
You don't think that Susie Wiles and Chris and the smart people on his campaign don't understand how often this guy loses his train of thought?
I think they do.
Forgets who he's fighting against. Thinks Jimmy Connors,
I'm certain they
the
do.
tennis pro from 74 to 77, actually also brokered the Camp David Accords. They know.
So they know. I think they also have a darker, they have a more critical view of Joe Biden's errors and missteps in this area than you do. And we're just talking here about not about what the right point of view is, but are they going to let Donald Trump go and debate?
Yeah.
It would be, I think, a very tricky thing for Donald Trump, whose main point of view is I am the tough guy. I roll over everything. I'm rolling over the legal system right now. Joe Biden is weak and failing. I'm strong and tough. Unstoppable, for him to have said, I will meet you anywhere, anytime, under any circumstances, and then to back out. I think he has painted himself into a corner because I think Trump himself did not necessarily believe that Biden would eventually ever stand up and say he would take these debates. Right. And now he's kind of in a corner. And I think, Donald Trump always tries to leave himself wiggle room. He's not left himself much here. So if you ask me, with a gun to my head, whether I think these debates are going to happen, I wouldn't say there's nothing close to 100%. Right. I'd say a little more likely than not that Trump will feel like he has no choice but to do these two.
Number one, you said about what about his campaign thinking he's going to go in there not with knowledge, not with experience on the world stage that was productive, but he's going to go in there with insults, with a fire hose of falsehoods, with personal stuff about Joe Biden, and he's going to come at him hard, and that's going to be the challenge. Yeah. You laugh, but sometimes that throws people off. You never know. Jonathan
It worked for him in 2016.
Nika, I'm not laughing.
Oh, okay.
But I'm smiling at the fact that when Donald Trump tries all of those things that he does in front of his fat Elvis 77 crowd, where they roar and say, please throw a sweaty scarf in my direction, it's going to be met with dead silence. And everybody, like the cameramen and camerawomen, are going to be looking at each other going,
I don't underestimate it. It's the nasty behavior is so shocking that it can be off-putting.
Well, no, but it's
Jonathan Lemire. What about RFK Jr.?
Well, as part of these agreements, he is not going to be included in these debates, which RFK Jr. campaign put together some vociferous opposition to that yesterday, saying, look, we're factoring in the polls here. We should be part of this race. Some Americans may agree with them, but the Biden and Trump campaigns have cut him out. He is not going to be part of these debates. Trump, we should also note, is calling for more than just these two. Instead, he's even gotten an agreement with Fox News to host a third. But the Biden campaign says that, no, this will be it. Two presidential campaigns plus one for the vice presidentials, Kamala Harris versus whoever Trump picks as his running mate. That will be held in July. But to John's point here, I do think there's a sense that the Biden campaign also wants to box Trump in. They know he was out ahead of this, saying, I will debate you in any way. So the Biden camp's like, okay, we'll debate you. We're going to do it like this. And he can't let Trump now can't be perceived as walking away from that.
You know, when we've been talking over the past several months about younger voters seeming to break away from Joe Biden more, they've been looking at it through the wrong lens, talking about Gaza. Obviously, there are concerns on college campuses and with younger voters about Gaza, but it is inflation. When you really dig into the numbers, it is inflation. And younger Americans having trouble buying gasoline, having trouble buying groceries, and most importantly, trouble getting their first home. It is inflation that is driving them away from the Biden administration. The inflation data yesterday released revealed some good news for cash-strapped shoppers. Grocery prices dropped for the first time in a year. Food prices fell by 0.2% in April, according to the Labor Department's Consumer Price Report.
It is the first drop in a year. Eggs led the decline, with prices dropping more than 7%. Steve Ratner is over at the wall with charts to break it all down. Steve, what do you got? And can this continue? Because it's going to take a while for people to really feel the effects of this.
Yeah, look, as you guys have said, and Joe just said, the inflation data is critical to the election, and it has not gone well so far, but this may be the beginning of a better trend. So let's take a look at what happened yesterday, which was that the Bureau of Labor Statistics announced their latest data, and inflation is now, this is headline, we call headline, all the goods, up 3.4% year over year. And then we take out food and energy because they move around a lot, 3.6. But you can see what was happening, that we had gotten inflation down, it stalled out, it actually increased a little bit, and now we have somewhat better news. And I'm going to show you both in the financial markets and in public opinion, consumer sentiment, how that's affected. But what's also really important to note is that, yeah, a bunch of stuff is still going up. Car rental insurance is a really small part, 6% of the index. It's not something people buy every day. When you start to look at what people buy every day, you see food up 2.6%. 2.2% year over year. Get these lined up. Food up 2.2% year over year. Energy, gasoline, home heating, all that stuff up 2.6% year over year. And then goods, anything you buy, a piece of merchandise, actually down 1.3% year over year, led by furniture, appliances, and so forth. And so it is a picture of inflation that perhaps the average American doesn't fully appreciate. How much prices have moderated, especially for the things they buy every day. Yeah,
but Steve, let's look at housing up there. We're talking about housing, and you look at young voters. If you look at housing, if you look at the cost of cars, we were just talking about offset, how automobiles, used automobiles still, it's just, I was out last night at an event, and people were talking about how hard it is to still get a decent car.
Well,
and by a decent car, I'm not talking about one of your Rolls Royces.
Yeah,
I'm talking about
cars.
A Ford Fusion, if they even make one of those anymore.
Well, look, first on housing, yes, housing is still going up. The big problem on housing, as you know, is simply the affordability of a new house. House prices are still high, but mortgages are also high, which means the affordability, the ability of someone to afford a mortgage, literally, has gone down so much that for many young people, an 8% mortgage just makes a house unaffordable. And that's a huge problem. And one of the good things about the CPI numbers is it may give the Federal Reserve some leeway to cut interest rates a bit, which would bring down mortgage rates a bit.
Yeah.
It's not going to be dramatic between now and November,
So,
but maybe a little bit of help.
Steve, why is car rental and insurance so expensive?
There's a whole, it's a longer conversation.
No, I mean, it's 11.5%.
He's complaining.
And it's not that I'm complaining. It's just like, if you're working and your work makes you fly from city to city, and let's say you're in insurance or you're in finance or you just there, you know, the people every week I see on planes, and you know, that's what they do. And so they get off the plane, and then they have to go, and they're dealing with still 11, 12% increase. And what car rentals cost, man, it cuts into their salary.
It does. This is only 6% of the index. Let's start with that. Secondly, a lot of it is driven by insurance. And this is a longer discussion probably for CNBC. But insurance rates are going up across. Insurance
want to talk to us about it?
I'm happy to talk about it. You tell me when to stop.
It's over your heads, guys.
Tell me when to stop.
For the money people.
Keep going.
I like
Keep going.
I like purple. Go to the next chart.
All right, go to the next chart. You want to ask me something, or should I just plunge
No,
in?
talk about wages.
Please, I don't think there's anything
How are
that I
wages
could ask
doing?
you that would
Steve,
rise
I
to the
know
level of your expertise.
We're not CNBC anchors.
Yeah.
So I don't have like the lingo.
So what do you got, Steve? Wages. This is the key point yesterday. Somebody was complaining to me about inflation. I said, well, the real key is whether wage increase is keeping up with the inflation increase, because you don't want deflation.
That's right.
And so now you're going to tell me whether I was correct in saying that wages are keeping up.
You are
with
very
inflation.
correct. You are very correct.
Fantastic.
If you go back to 2020, now it is absolutely
Almost like
true.
I'm a host on CNBC. Go.
That was not a CNBC crack was not aimed at you, Joe. The if you go back to the inflation, or you, Mika.
No, that was definitely.
He's going after Mara. He's going after Mara and me. And Lahir.
no,
It's
that was
like,
for me.
we're like financial idiots over here.
And he's right.
It was actually aimed at Heilman. But that's
The easy target.
Fair enough.
All right, so go.
If you go back to when inflation was high back in 2022, it absolutely did not keep up. Wages absolutely did not keep up. But since inflation has moderated faster than wages have come down, have also moderated. And so you have had, Joe, to your point, from well more than a year now, wage increases running above inflation increases. 4% on average for wages, 3.4% for inflation. Not a huge difference, but positive purchasing power. And if you looked at the bottom quarter of Americans, they have done materially better than this 4%. And so for the bottom group of Americans, their purchasing power has actually increased by more than this.
Hey, Steve, can I ask you this question?
Sure.
As Alex goes crazy because I'm just blowing past
it's just,
every break
you really
here.
have no discipline.
You know, post-COVID, because you're talking about the bottom third of Americans doing better here. The history of this country from the early 1980s onward are the rich were getting richer, the poor were getting poor. Post-COVID, actually, the lower third, lower half of Americans actually were getting ahead for the first time and doing better for the first time. Are we still there? Are some of those safety net measures, post-COVID measures, are they now running out? And are we returning to the old model of the rich getting richer, the poor getting poor?
No, income inequality is actually still narrowing. But the reason it's narrowing, the post-COVID programs certainly helped for a while. They are phasing out. But what really helps is the fact that we're running the economy with a very low unemployment rate. And so what that means is that employers have to pay more to get their workers. And you couple that with a lot of the minimum wage increases that were imposed during COVID and things like that, there's actually more demand for lower-end workers than for higher-end workers. And so they pay more at the lower end. And that is really what is driving this significant increase in wages. And Americans don't appreciate it, but their purchasing power is going up at this moment, especially for those near the bottom. But let me show you one other interesting side of this chart, and then we can move on. But if you start to look at it by state, and these numbers, are not as precise. Start to look at it by state, you see some interesting things, which is that there are some states, Louisiana, West Virginia, where consumers have been losing ground, where their real wages have not kept up. But there are other states, including a couple of key swing states, where, in fact, it's going the other way. Wisconsin, it looks like real wages, adjusted for inflation, are up something like 7%.
Wow.
It may or may not be a coincidence. I'll leave that to Heilman to say whether that's perhaps part of why Biden performed better in that New York Times poll in Wisconsin than in any of the other states. But you also have positive real wages in Michigan. Pennsylvania is down a little bit. Nevada is effectively flat. Arizona is actually up 1.8%. And Georgia, which we can argue about whether it's even a swing state anymore, down 2.
All right.
But can I do my last one?
Yeah.
Real last one quickly.
Yeah,
but look, this is an interesting chart that I don't think we've ever looked at, but it's so dramatic, Joe, that I did want to show it, which is the relationship to your earlier point between inflation and consumer sentiment. So back here in 2000, even in 2020, you had high consumer sentiment, low inflation. Then inflation shoots up, consumer sentiment falls off a cliff. Then inflation starts to come down, consumer sentiment goes right back up again. And then this very last month, because inflation had stalled out and actually had reversed and gone the wrong way for a month or two, consumer sentiment fell again. And so the tie between these two is incredibly dramatic, and it needs to penetrate people that we are bringing down inflation. And then very lastly, the stock market has voted on the Biden policies and on inflation. It's up 43% since the president took office. It's up about 18% this year. And it had a huge day yesterday because of these good consumer price numbers, which raised the prospect of the Fed hopefully being able to cut interest rates at some point.
So interesting.
Another week like that, Heilman, and he will buy a Rolls Royce.
Morning, Joe, economic analyst. Steve Bradner.
Rolls Royce for me?
No, he's not getting a Rolls.
A Rolls of my very own.
Of your very own, yes.
Kind of random, but Morgan Radford did a piece on inflation relocation, where states are offering incentives to people to move to more rural parts of the country where prices are lower. Isn't that interesting?
And it's happening.
That's the offshoot.
It
Like
really
West
is.
Virginia.
You know,
Into your knowledge about Russia, because Russia is once again using disinformation videos to smear President Biden ahead of the November election. The New York Times highlights one video circulating on social media claiming to tell the story of an internet troll farm in Kyiv targeting the American election. A woman, quote, offers a first-person account of how she and her colleagues initially worked in support of President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine. Then, she says, after a visit by mysterious Americans who were, quote, probably CIA, the group began sending messages to American audiences in support of President Biden. We were told our new target was the United States of America, especially the upcoming elections, the woman in the video says. Long story short, we were asked to do everything to prevent Donald Trump from winning the elections. The Times notes the video is fake, part of an effort to cloud the political debate ahead of the U.S. elections. U.S. officials tell the paper the video is consistent with Russian disinformation operations, as internet warriors aligned with Russia appear to be honing their strategy, and such videos were one of the most immediate threats. According to the Times, Russian operatives are leaning into videos, many of them that falsely purport to be made by independent journalists or whistleblowers. The videos, opposed to blog or social media posts, are most likely to spread beyond the conspiratorial fringes of America and become part of mainstream discourse.
You know, Tom, one of the more maddening things that you will see out there, people talking about the Russian hoax. They keep talking about the Russian hoax. The Russians never tried to influence our elections. It's all, you know, this, that, or the other. You actually have the chairman of the House GOP Armed Services Committee, Intel Committee, and Foreign Affairs Committee all saying that Russian disinformation is being spread on the House floor by Republican members. And here we have more reporting of what's never really stopped, and that is Vladimir Putin and Russia trying to help Donald Trump get elected again. I mean, hoax? There is no hoax. The propaganda is going not only on media sources now, Putin has now figured out a way to use House GOP members to spread Russia's lies.
and in part, the Americans, the American public is a willing accomplice here, because when this stuff shows up on the internet or on Facebook or YouTube or wherever people get it, when I'm asked what can they do about this, I say stop getting your news there. It's kind of like eating junk food all day. There's a really simple answer to that. Stop eating, stop having milkshakes for breakfast. And people don't want to do that, because one thing the Russians really understand about us is that Americans are easily bored and we love a good story. We love this stuff. We eat it up. The Republicans in Congress, I think, know exactly what they're doing because it's convenient to them, and it gives them a good narrative to say, the classic, well, I'm just asking questions kind of pose. And I think that, it's just ready-made kind of convenient propaganda for them. But in the end, the problem with the Russian attack on America is how much the Americans really do welcome it, and that because we have an open system of government, because we have a free press, we're sort of defenseless against stopping any of it. And it has to be on each one of us to just decide we're not going to get our information there. And I just don't have a lot of hope that that's going to happen.
That's what
So, Jen, you sadly know a thing or two about the impact of Russian disinformation campaigns back in 2016. We had Senator Warner from Virginia on the show this week saying he's more worried about foreign election interference this time around even than in 2020. He thinks we're less prepared. It's not just going to be Russia, it could be China, other places as well. What would the advice be to the Biden campaign? How can they learn from this? How can they combat this?
The hardest thing that we had to combat in 2016 was no one believed us, right? Like when we would say, even after there had been reporting on what Russia was doing in the Post, and we would go to the press and say, we think a lot of this is coming from Russia. And it was just so fantastic for everyone that they couldn't really, they couldn't appreciate that that's what was really happening. And now people do know that.
Hey,
so I think it's a lot easier.
Can I read this for you? Can I read this for you? And then you continue.
Yeah.
It's not just the Washington Post. The GOP Senate Intel report that was run by Marco Rubio. They wrote this in 2017. The report's language often starts describing Trump's campaign chairman Manafort's receptivity to Russian outreach as, quote, a grave counterintelligence threat that made the campaign susceptible to malign Russian influence. Marco Rubio's committee said Russia presented a grave counterintelligence threat. That was Marco Rubio and the Republicans. And yet people still want to write op-eds on the Wall Street Journal editorial page talking about Russia hoax. Marco Rubio talked about Russia presented by this disinformation. Let me say it again. Quote, a grave counterintelligence threat. And
they had, in 16, we had the Post did a good story in June of 16 to say where they thought a lot of this was coming from, U.S. administration officials on background. And of course, on October 7th, 2016, we had the declaration from the Obama administration that Russia was behind the hacks. We later had an intelligence estimate that it was not just the Russians behind this, but trying to help Donald Trump win. That was all during the Obama administration. But it was too fantastic for people to appreciate. And now we've had 8 years of this. And it is, and I think at least, even though it's more widespread, when you say you can't trust that it's it could be from the Russians, at least people understand now that's something that they got to look out for. And I think you just have to call out lies immediately and right away and point them out to people, and people have to be better judges of what they're reading.
That's a lot to ask for.
It is.
So, Eddie, people have to be aware of this. We just listened to Jen's tale, which is actually factual. It actually happened. It actually impacted a presidential election. And it's not just Russia now. There's a tsunami of misinformation out there. Russia, China, various other countries, all aimed at our increasingly fragile democracy. Right. So part of what you do for a living is teach. And part of what you teach is the history of this country, of race in this country, of the culture of this country today. This is a potential lethal threat to our country.
Absolutely. In so many ways, people are kind of post fact in some ways. They want to affirm their opinions. And in some ways, this is also echoing something Tom said, right? That America's appetite for this drives it. That, stop drinking milkshakes for breakfast, although some of us like milkshakes for breakfast.
Smoothies.
What makes it successful is that it's actually tapping into a set of positions and beliefs that many Americans hold, and then they're exploiting it and amplifying it. And so one of the questions we have to ask ourselves is not only are they hacking and doing the kind of concrete work, why is it so effective? How are they exploiting?
Eddie, they don't have to anymore. All they have to do is get the information on the Chinese Communist Party's app, which of course is TikTok. The Chinese Communist Party runs that app. They make sure that the algorithms are run in a way that spreads disinformation into America. If you don't believe it, talk about the Uyghurs. Talk about human suffering in Hong Kong. Talk about human rights abuses in China, and see how much of a pickup that gets on TikTok. They kill it. But if you spread disinformation about Joe Biden, Russian disinformation, you've got the Russians and the communist Chinese running roughshod across America, and everybody's against it except Donald Trump, who now supports TikTok.
Right, for his own interests, right? So I think that all makes sense to me, Joe. And part of what I'm trying to wrap my mind around is the way and why it's effective. It's effective, of course, for all the reasons you just laid out, but it's also exploiting extant divisions, right? There's a kind of dispositional orientation to the misinformation that allows it to take root. And I think, how do we address both ends of it? That's what the Russians and the Chinese are doing and what we are susceptible to, if that makes sense.
There's so much stupidity out there that is peddled by people. Two great examples. There's a guy that used to be in Mumford & Sons who debated at the Oxford Union, debated Nancy Pelosi, and when he got pushed into a corner, he just talked about Joe Biden's severe dementia, that he's has such severe dementia he can hardly operate. It's a lie. It's a complete, total lie. And yet that's pushed, and it's pushed by these third parties. I mean, and you have other lies about how great Russia is. Tucker Carlson running around saying, "Oh my God, look at the grocery! It's a worker's paradise." He seriously sounded like a guy who defected to the Soviet Union in '62, and he pushes that, he peddles that Russian disinformation actively.
Yep.
Yeah, and giving it a large platform, not as large as it used to have on cable, but still does. Aaron Rodgers drafted to that mission this week. And we should note, where's Vladimir Putin today? He's in Beijing. He's meeting with Xi Jinping. I mean, this is sort of the alliance that's against democracies. And we don't know if this is a topic of conversation, but certainly their greater interests are making the United States as weak as possible.
This week, leaders in the Republican Party went up to that trial, stood outside the courthouse, and attacked our legal system. How does that make you feel about Republicans right now?
Yeah, I think it's a terrible fault for our country to see people attacking our legal system. That's an enormous mistake. I think it's also demeaning for people to quite apparently try and run for vice president by donning the red tie and standing outside the courthouse. It's just, I'd have felt awkward were I one of those individuals. But I can also say, I think President Biden made an enormous error. He should have fought like crazy to keep this prosecution from going forward. It was a win-win for Donald Trump. If Donald Trump is exonerated...
Is that Joe Biden's job, or is that shouldn't there be a separation?
I've been around for a while. If LBJ had been president and he didn't want something like this to happen, he'd have been all over that prosecutor saying, "You better not bring that forward or I'm going to drive you out of office."
But I'm pretty sure you support having separate but equal branches of government.
I do, but I also, let me tell you, I mean, you may disagree with this, but had I been President Biden, when the Justice Department brought out indictments, I would have immediately pardoned him. I'd have pardoned President Trump. Why? Well, because it makes me, President Biden, the big guy, and the person I pardoned, the little guy.
I am so confused, Stephanie, for a lot of reasons.
First of all, Donald Trump hasn't admitted guilt.
Yeah, and also, it's not 1965. Like LBJ pressuring people to either prosecute or not prosecute. It's exactly what scares us about what Donald Trump's promising to do in the next term. So he's not any different than Donald Trump there, saying as president, I would have pressured prosecutors. There's also the possibility that you pressure a prosecutor to drop a case and the prosecutor says, screw you, making that prosecutor even more powerful. He's feeding into the lie, and I don't think he's attempting to feed into the lie here. The Fox News lie that a lot of Fox News primetime hosts spread, that this all was concocted by Joe Biden and could all be ended by Joe Biden. That's number one. I would love for you to talk about that. Number two, I'd also love to have you talk about how Mitt Romney thinks that a guy who's a former president, who stole nuclear secrets, who stole our secret invasion plans to Iran, which we may still have to do at some point, who stole some of the most damning secrets about the United States regarding our defense weaknesses, and then lied about it to the FBI. FBI tries to get it back. Justice Department tries to get it back. Lies. Then when that doesn't work, he goes to his IT person, pressures him to destroy the information. The IT person, the cameras, refuses to. Then he goes to his groundskeeper, says, can you flood out those rooms with all of those documents, drain the pool, according to testimony that we're going to be hearing. All of this, massive cover-ups, obstruction of justice on top secret security issues, including nuclear secrets.
Senator Romney agrees with everything you said.
Yeah, but Mitt Romney just said, we should have just given him a free pass on all of that.
Yes, he's saying we should just move on. We should be done with Donald Trump. And Mitt Romney is very clear he's not going to vote for Donald Trump. But it's very strange to see a U.S. senator, a former governor, who has spent decades of his life in our government, who deeply respects our government, simply saying we should ignore the rule of law because all of this circus is good for Donald Trump politically. Donald Trump loves the free press, and it helps him.
Yeah. Jonathan Lemire, do you have a question? Or would you like to just scratch your head in utter befuddlement like the rest of us?
That would be fine.
Yeah, that's my instinct. I mean, it is so surprising for Senator Romney, who has stood up to Trump in so many ways.
And he's not voting for him, and he makes it very clear.
That is fine. And maybe he thinks he's putting country first. He's trying to be above partisanship, to suggest that we should all move on and heal as a nation. But that seems strikingly naive for someone. We're talking about Donald Trump, who has, as Joe just said, made deeply clear what he will do if he's in office again. The things that Romney says we should pardon and forget. Trump is saying, I'm going to keep doing that and more.
Worse.
And
yes.
it'd be that much more emboldened. I just am stunned for someone who has been one of the Republican Party's very few consistent Trump critics that he would go down this path.
Okay, there's that unserious thing. And the other unserious thing is Mitt Romney still doesn't want to say who he's going to vote for. Remember, in the last two elections, he wrote in his wife's name. That's not a serious thing to do. And he laid out in our 25-minute conversation all the serious risks our country faces, yet he doesn't want to say what he's going to do. The interesting part is he said he doesn't want to publicly say because he doesn't want to lose the influence he has with his party, which begs the question, what is it that you're going to do next?
So
Senator
let's bring
Romney.
in more voices to this conversation. MSNBC political analyst and publisher of the newsletter The Ink, Anand Giridharadas, the co-host of MSNBC's The Weekend and Morning Mika, Simone Sanders Townsend, and editor of The New Republic, Michael Tomasky, is with us. The publication is out with a special report for its June edition entitled American Fascism, What It Would Look Like and What Good Timing for that topic.
Yeah, it does. Michael.
Yes, sir.
Michael. I mean, I don't want to say, is this how fascism wins? Is this how fascism
maybe you just
rises?
ask.
But when you have people saying, oh, we can't impeach him, and then they go, oh, we can't prosecute him for the stealing of nuclear secrets, then the covering up of the stealing of nuclear secrets, then the lying to the Justice Department about stealing nuclear secrets, and then the lying to the FBI about the stealing of nuclear secrets, and then the attempt to destroy cameras that show you stole nuclear secrets, then the attempt to flood the facilities to hide the fact you stole nuclear secrets. And you've got Mitt Romney, who's supposed to be the paragon of virtue for the Republican Party, saying, let him go. Please, please. Where does this lead us as a nation?
That is how fascism wins, Joe. And as Jonathan just said a couple minutes ago, you pair all of that, the past actions, with what he is plainly telling us he's going to do if he gets power again. You know, he hasn't made any secret of this. You know, Project 2025 spells it out very clearly. There have been many leaks to the New York Times and other publications from his people saying what they're going to do in terms of, for example, rounding up undocumented immigrants and so on. And then there's his own recent Time magazine interview, that shocking interview just a couple weeks ago, where he said openly the things he is going to do. I guess some would dispute the term fascism. I sure don't. I know millions and millions of Americans don't. When he says, you know, the threat is internal and these people are vermin polluting our country, that's fascist rhetoric. There's no way around it. So what we've done, if I may just quickly plug, we have 8 essays in our new issue by some of the great historians of fascism in our country, Ruth Ben-Ghiat being one of them, and other pieces. Brian Stelter, formerly of CNN, did a fantastic, chilling piece on what might happen to the media. Just 8 different articles looking at what this country might be like if he reassumes power and has his way and does the things he and his people are telling us they're going to do.
And by the way, Anna, everything that they write about, Donald Trump has already promised to do.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting is thinking about this interview you did, is that a lot of the reaction to Trump is not about ideology, it's about personality type. And I think since 2015, he came down the elevator, there have been 2 dominant personalities we've seen processing him. One of clarity and one that has this kind of emotional need to pursue balance at any price. Right? You see it in the media and you see it in leaders. I think I look at someone like Romney there, and it's this deep constitutional need to be balanced, no matter what. And so, yes, he's a criminal, but he should be part. Anytime you say anything that acknowledges the reality of the danger, there are these people, and they're in our media. They run newspapers.
But that's
they run
not constitutional balance. That's
no. I don't mean constitution like the. I mean like inner constitution.
Oh, okay.
They think that's
in
how
their
you show
inner
strong
constitution.
moral
It actually has nothing to do with what's happening. There's a certain personality type that is very dangerous for a moment like this.
Romney is thinking, this is better to balance my Constitution than actually protect
the Constitution. That he almost has a need, and a lot of people do. And I think it has actually been one of the biggest problems in the media also processing Trumpism, where you have newspapers that are very used to covering normal 2 sides, low taxes, high taxes, big government, small government. But when it is, do we do democracy anymore or not? There's this kind of both sidesing impulse. And that, to me, was the political version of the both sidesing impulse. And it's the wrong personality for, if Michael and the New Republic is right that we are in this very different historical moment with fascism, it is the wrong personality to protect the country in this time.
Anna's absolutely right, because in our conversation, we talked about, what would a second term look like for President Biden, or Donald Trump, right? The country is so polarized, it's divided. Joe Biden has actually gotten a ton done on a bipartisan basis.
True.
And I said, what would he need to do in the next term to try to really bring, people together? And I said, and what would Trump do? And he said, obviously, Trump is not looking to unite the country. He specializes in dividing it. And in it, he said, Joe Biden is a good guy. I like Joe Biden. And he didn't say that about Donald Trump. So I asked him about that. And immediately he needed to equate things. He wasn't going to say, I like Donald Trump. He's a good guy. He said, well, he's a laugh riot. He's really funny.
Oh.
And I'm like, really? Like that? Because he had to create an equivalency.
Well, the riot part
So
is true.
there you go.
Actually, Mussolini played the Catskills in the teens.
A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, there is always this equivalency, and you would see it. I saw it the first time in the National Review where somebody said, yes, January 6th was bad.
Right.
But did you see what Joe Biden did with student loans?
Right.
Yes.
And they continue that argument. That's
so similar, those two things.
Because he tried to use his presidential authority to forgive student loans, which, by the way, provided a check. And the Supreme Court came back and said, no, too much. You're going to have to figure out a more tailored way to do that. But you will still hear, and John Meacham always laughs about it in a sort of gallows humor way, that he will talk to top Republicans who will still say, Oh, you talk about January 6th. Did you see what Joe Biden tried to do on student loans?
Can I just make one point about the student loans?
Serious.
So
real quick, I want to get to some.
Okay. You go ahead, but really, we don't have to even talk about this because people didn't die because of the student loans. There was a balance, a check on power, because Joe Biden plays within the guardrails, the constitutional guardrails.
Okay, but on student loans, because Mitt Romney really went off on student loans, how terrible it was, and that's buying votes. Let's even assume it is. Let's give him that point. Great. What do you think the carried interest loophole is? Buying votes. What do you think former President Trump meeting with oil executives at Mar-a-Lago last week and trying to get $1 billion out of them and saying, I'll make you a deal. What do you think that deal is? Buying votes. So to say, like, look at Joe Biden buying votes
and by the way,
for giving student
why
loans.
doesn't Mitt Romney talk about the fact that after he passed the largest tax cut in world history, not American history, for billionaires and multinational corporations, Donald Trump flew on Air Force One from Washington, D.C. to Mar-a-Lago. He sat around a table with billionaires, and what did he say? I just made all of you a lot richer today.
And it's time now for business with co-anchor of CNBC's Squawk Box, Andrew Ross Sorkin. He's also a columnist for the New York Times. It's nice to see you in person.
Business for the bill. We were going to talk about, we talked about many things last block about all the people that are sort of cozying up to Trump after being distant from him. New York Times Business, you and I talked about beforehand, Wall Street warms up to Trump, and you open up the article, and it just talks about it says, and you interviewed Jamie Dimon, and so you're like, Jamie didn't go all the way there, but this New York Times article suggests that Jamie Dimon provided cover for people on Wall Street to support Donald Trump. There's also Mark Andreessen's name in there as a guy that
Mark
said
Andreessen, Ken Griffin.
Going to do whatever he can.
Look, I still think those comments that Jamie made have been misconstrued, but I do think there's clearly a sea change among historically Republican business leaders who had tried to walk away from Trump, said they were effectively walking away, and have now returned
so
to
Andrew,
the scene,
I know
if you
they
will.
don't usually follow the Dow Jones average, but they're richer than ever. They're
richer than ever. By the way, the Dow is 92 points away from the heights, historical heights.
It just keeps breaking records. It's about to go over 40,000. And these people that keep whining about Biden's a socialist, like, if this is socialism, I know a lot of hedge fund managers would say, give me more, because people just keep getting richer and richer on Wall Street.
Well, there's also this very other strain. There's also the Bill Ackman view, though. So there's the Republican business leaders who are returning to Trump, and then there's this other view, and it's sort of led by a Bill Ackman kind of category that somehow doesn't like Biden, also doesn't like Trump, but somehow thinks in a sort of fever dream-like way that there's going to be some kind of unicorn who's going to emerge as and come in and replace Biden. And so they're going to slam Biden over and over again, hoping somehow that he's going to step down.
How calculated is this? How many people just want to be the next Treasury Secretary?
Well, look,
just want to have.
There are those who just want to be in the circle. There's the group that always just wants power, right? This sort of amoral, I just want to be with
because
power,
they got the
no
money.
matter what.
They got the money now because Joe Biden's stock market's bigger, powerful than Donald Trump's was.
But the thing we were talking about during the commercial break is there's a value in the business world and in life to stability.
Right.
To stability. And just think about the volatility that is going to emerge if former President Trump becomes the president. I mean, I think if there's anything you can count on, it's volatility.
So let's give a perfect example.
Okay.
All right. And Wall Street dudes, if you're too busy counting your money right now, you may want to look up at me, because let me tell you what the world looks like if Donald Trump's elected president of the United States. I mean, and I know this. I went to Alabama. I took one Econ 101 class, and I read Sports Illustrated in the back. But even I know this. Donald Trump is going to take control any way he can of every lever of power possible. He's not going to like interest rates high, so he's going to lower them. He's going to pressure. He's talked about taking control of the Fed. He'll do it. The inflation, seriously, all I can say is go to Home Depot and buy some wheelbarrows, because you're going to be like shoving dollar bills around in your wheelbarrows. That's just one example. Right. If he takes control of the Fed, you know what he's going to do. Even when it's going to be the worst thing for the economy, it's going to be inflationary. So, he's going to lower interest rates.
I think that the business community knows this, though, too. He will find a way, in his own way, to try to juice the economy. The problem is it's going to be a sugar high. By the way, we saw this before. We saw this movie before. And in everything he's done, there is a sugar high, and they want the sugar. But the question is what happens after the sugar? And that is the real conundrum. And beyond the issues around democracy and everything else.
9% interest rates after the sugar. It's going to be higher if Trump gets in there. And suddenly he's saying, I'm going to control, you know, the FEC. I'm going to control the FTC. I'm going to control the Fed. I mean, we know where this leads. It's bad.
I mean, talking about Jamie Dimon, I think 2019, Jamie Dimon was running the Business Roundtable, as you know, and he put out what they billed as a historic statement on behalf of all American big enterprise, reversing a decades-old policy. The decades-old policy said the purpose of business is only to serve shareholders' interests, and that's how they had been doing it. 2019, Jamie Dimon goes out front and says, no, society matters. All of our stakeholders matter. Corporations are no longer just about the bottom line. We care about these other issues, right? It's now been 5 years. You spend a lot of time with CEOs. Do you know a single CEO with a real moral core, by which I would say they would sacrifice shareholter value? And you could cite a place where they did it.
I'll make it worse for you. I was at a dinner. I'm not going to say who's at the dinner. I would say 20-plus CEOs you know. And everybody actually went around the table. If you would sign that pledge from 2019 about society over profits if you'd sign it again in this environment today, I think it was like 3 or 4 hands went up.
Why?
I think that there was a view that the push towards ESG, environmental, social governance types of issues. Right. I mean, I think you're seeing some of the DEI things that have happened now on campus and other things, that by saying that they were going to focus on all these other issues, that it became too complicated for them. It goes back to DeSantis, frankly. I think that they all of a sudden realized that there would be a political push on the other side against them, and they gotten scared.
And we should let them be them, but treat them accordingly. If they are, in fact, operating with no moral core and only for the purpose of their investors, we should tax and regulate them accordingly and not treat them as sources of wisdom, political guidance, or kind of moral courage.
We got to do football.
We got to do
football,
that.
NFL on
Netflix.
I mean, that's a huge move.
Thank you very much for being on this morning. That was very depressing.
Can you be here tomorrow?
Ana Georgidis, thank you very much.
Thank you.
This morning, a surprising political alliance is tackling an issue that transcends politics and touches at the core of the human experience: loneliness. NBC News congressional correspondent Julie Sirkin joins us from Washington with more. Julie, tell us about who's teaming up on this.
Well, Mika, especially in such a divisive and bitter point in our politics, when do we ever talk about happiness when it comes to elected officials and Congress legislating to really make people happy and figure out the loneliness epidemic that these two officials, Governor Spencer Cox, a Republican of Utah, and Democrat Senator Chris Murphy, say is plaguing American society? Watch this part of my interview with them. What drew a Republican governor of Utah to a Democratic senator from Connecticut?
I see how children, but our entire society is withdrawing from each other. And I reached out to Governor Cox about a year ago to just understand the steps he had been taking in Utah to try to build a more connected community, to try to figure out why Utah is a place with really high social capital, with people who feel maybe a little bit more connected into the community than in other parts of the country, and to see if there was work that we could do together.
Why should lawmakers, governors, elected officials put happiness first and foremost when they're thinking about policy?
Well, it's right there in the Declaration of Independence that human beings, Americans, have a right to pursue happiness. Now, government can't deliver the last mile of happiness, right? That's up to everybody individually to figure out. But I think we are in charge of trying to set rules and laws and norms that give people a better shot at happiness. If you get beyond the fights over abortion or immigration or guns even, you might be able to find a lot more common agreement between the right and the left on the things that are actually most directly relevant to how people find happiness, connection into neighbors, into family, into the common good.
Look, I agree that it's not government's job to make people happy, but it is government's job to protect those rights that we've been given from on high: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And sometimes government actually can make people less happy or can make it more difficult for them to pursue happiness.
What motivated you to put legislation in place to basically force social media companies to bar children who are under the age of 18 from accessing their app?
We now have several studies of schools that have banned cell phones and saw reductions in problems, bullying, self-harm, anxiety, raising test scores. All of the science and data is showing us that this is a major cause of that. And so this is one area where government, I think, can appropriately intervene.
Why do you think loneliness plays such a big factor in people who engage in harm to others, in self-harm, in gun violence?
Listen, for anyone to carry out an act of epic level violence, you have to be fundamentally disconnected from your community. And we are just seeing more and more young people who feel like they don't belong, like they are outsiders. And some of those then choose to take that frustration, that anxiety into their own hands and engage in these absolutely terrible and despicable acts of violence.
Can you share your experiences quickly here with self-isolation, with loneliness yourselves?
My parents got divorced when I was 10, and that was a really hard and dark time for me. I went through a period of time where I thought the world would be a better place if I wasn't in it, and I'm so grateful that I had institutions and community and people around me that cared about me in that dark time. And so that's something that I felt very personally that has kind of driven me to this work from the very beginning.
There's no doubt that as a parent, I have often felt very alone, right? And almost every parent out there has had a real sense of aloneness in a world that is changing very fast, with kids that are dealing with challenges, whether it be the risk of violence at school, whether it be social media, whether it be bullying online, that are things very unfamiliar to us, having not had to have gone through those.
So, Mika, these are powerful people, elected officials who really can relate with so many Americans in their personal experiences of self-isolation, of loneliness. You heard them talk about different factors from social media. Later in their interview, they talked about lack of housing, affordable housing, the economy. I mean, so many different factors that is impacting why Americans are feeling more alone than ever, according to studies. And the one thing that the two officials agreed on is government has a role here to play in legislating around this issue. They did say that this is not a problem where they already have a solution prescribed. They are sitting down, having roundtables, listening to experts, everyday Americans, before they decide what role exactly government should play here. But certainly a very interesting topic, an adventure these two are partnering on.
A huge issue. I'm so glad they're doing this. NBC News congressional correspondent Julie Zirkin, thank you for bringing it to us.